everyone, my name is Hannah and today I'm super excited to talk to you because spring is beginning to start. And as spring rolls in, we have a few returning Iowans. Let's see if you can figure out who I'm talking about with these two hints. They sing songs and we see them in the sky. Was that enough? Did you get it? I'm talking about birds, of course. Today's topic will be all about birds, so let's get into it. First things first. When we think of birds, what do we think of? What are some characteristics of them that we think of? Well, some characteristics of birds are feathers, bills, hollow bones, chirping, and they lay eggs. These are just a few. There's so many others. Some that are unique to birds and some that aren't. The first thing that we're going to dive into are feathers. So let's talk about feathers. The different types of feathers, their colors, molting, and their purpose. There are three main types of feathers: down, contour, and flickrBlue. Down and flickrBlue are mainly used for insulation to keep the heat in and keep them warm during the winter. And contour feathers are primarily used for flying, and they define the outer side of the body. So what the bird usually looks like, it defines that. So let's look at a picture of what each of these looks like. When we think of bird feathers, we think of shape, of course, but also colors. So how do birds get these colors? Colors come from two different ways: biochrome pigments and structural pigments. So let's get into biochrome. Biochrome is melanins, which are browns, and carotenoids, which are bright reds, yellows, and oranges. An example of a bird having this is an owl. Take a look at this owl. Biochrome pigments are made naturally. But what about some pigments that aren't made naturally? That's when structural colors come into play. Structural colors are microscopic irregularities in the feathers. This makes up a lot of the blues, like in this blue jay. These nice colorful feathers get worn and damaged as time goes on. The process of molting replaces these feathers to keep their nice color and shape. Molts are hormonal changes that are triggered by seasonal changes. A lot of animals or a lot of birds get dull in the winter because it matches their background. Each generation of feathers is called a plumage. The general plumages are natal, juvenile, and basic, which is winter, and juvenile, breeding. Large feathers do take a lot longer time than smaller feathers, and molts vary greatly. It can be as quick as 2 weeks or as long as 2 years. Let's think about the overall purpose of some feathers. The purpose is to attract mates, for protection, and becoming aerodynamic. Flying. Flying is a huge part of birds. So two things they must counteract in order to fly are called lift and thrust. Thrust is counteracted by the downstroke in most birds, and lift is produced by an airfoil that gets caught in their wings. There are 4 primary types of flying. Soaring and gliding is first. Hawks or vultures do this. These birds use thermal vents to gain height. This is as the sun hits the ground, it heats it, and the heat rises, so the bird is able to move in a circular motion all the way up and ride it down. The large surface on their wings requires less flapping, and they are able to glide a little bit more. Here's a diagram to further expand on that. The next one is flapping. Smaller birds like chickadees and blue jays need to do a lot of flapping because their surface area on their wings are a lot smaller. So that is just your general bird flapping its way through the air. Formation flying. Geese fly in a V formation, and this reduces drag and saves them a lot of energy. So we see this almost all the time. When you look up in the sky, there's a lot of birds that do fly in the V formation. Here's a picture to illustrate that. Lastly, there's slope flying or dynamic flying. This is when birds, maybe by the sea, as you can see in this next image I will show you, ride the waves seemingly. They almost hit it and it bounces them off. But here's an image to better illustrate that. How can we talk about birds and not talk about migration? When we think of migration, we think of birds. But what is migration? Migration is a seasonal movement from one place to another. About 4,000 species of birds migrate. This is around 40% of the total number of birds in the world. And migration isn't an easy task. It takes a lot to migrate, and it's really dangerous. A lot of birds don't make it back. But why migrate? Many birds are not able to keep up with the colder temperatures, especially here in Iowa, that we get. And some go to their nesting places, and that's where they will mate and nest. Another thing that we can't ignore when we're talking about birds are calls and songs. Songs are made by males only to attract mates, to sound really pretty. Calls are made by both sexes to signal warnings, or maybe there's a place to go eat, something really tasty. But we can always identify what species are making these sounds. So let's explore a few species that make these sounds. Now we will look at 5 common Iowa species, especially during the springtime. We'll see if you can identify these when you're out in the field. Here's our first bird, the red-winged blackbird. We can tell this is a male by the full black color and bright red shoulder. The brighter the red, the more attractive it is to other mates. Here's what they sound like. This bird is the black-capped chickadee. Although this might be harder to see because it's so small, it is easily identifiable by the black cap, the white stripe underneath the eye, and the black beard. Although it might be hard to see this bird, you will definitely recognize its song. The first one I will play is the Phoebe song, or the Hey Girl song. This next one I will play is the chickadee call. This next one should be super easy to identify from its red color and its commonness in our front yards and backyards. It's the cardinal, of course. Here's how you can identify the cardinal without seeing it. This bird is also really easy to identify. You probably already know it. It's a crow, of course, so here's what it sounds like. Our next bird is a little bit harder to identify. This is the white-breasted nuthatch. It is identifiable by the mohawk that goes from the bill to the back, and this gray bluish color on the back. This is a very pretty bird, and it's a little silly. It does like to sit in this form, like going down, and here's what it sounds like. Alrighty everyone, now it's time for our 5 fast facts. The Arctic tern has the longest migration of any bird. The smallest bird is the bee hummingbird, and you can find it in Cuba. The largest bird is the ostrich, and you can find these in Africa. The brown-headed cowbird lays their eggs in other birds' nests. Owls are not able to move their eyes. In order to move them, they have to turn their head. Penguins are the only bird that swim but not fly, and are also the only bird that stands upright. Let's test your knowledge. I'll ask 3 questions and see if you can remember what the answers are. No worries, it's not graded. The first question is, what is migration? How would you define it? The answer is the seasonal movement from one place to another. The second question is, what are 2 ways colors are made in birds? The answer is biochrome pigments and structural. What is it called when a bird sheds its feathers? Molting. That is all I have for you today. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.